I want to welcome you to the bottom line group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is our regular Tuesday evening 8:30 step meeting. This is a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we ask that you silence your cell phones and pagers at this time, and please refrain from cursing when you share. Could I please have 3 volunteers to clean up after the meeting? Hands, hands, hands. That's 2, 3, 4. That's beautiful. Thank you. By the way, I want to pass something along to you. I hope it does not offend you. About 350 years ago, what's the matter? That was your prior life or what? Could have been, yeah. Students who were to become lawyers in England were educated at what they call the Inns of Court, and they are still educated that way. The Inns of Court are in downtown London, and they had to memorize a lot of things, and they developed a system of memorization which required mnemonic devices. In other words, you take the first letter of each of the words of a definition and you make a word out of that, a mnemonic device. That way would help them remember. And one of the things they had to do was to memorize the elements of various crimes. And one of the crimes they had to memorize the elements for was a crime of rape. And the elements of the crime of rape are forceful, unlawful, carnal knowledge. And that's where that word came from. It wouldn't be a bad idea, I suppose, to remember that originally that word stood for rape. In any event, that's a little digression, and I hope no one is offended. In support of AA Singleness of Purpose, attendance at closed meetings is limited to persons who have a desire to stop drinking. If you think you have a problem with alcohol, you're welcome to attend this meeting. We ask that when discussing our problems, we confine ourselves to those problems as they relate to alcoholism. Would you please join me in a moment of silent meditation, and we'll say the Serenity Prayer together. Thank you. Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. My name is Jim. I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I'm happy to see all of you here. Thank you for coming. We have anyone here who's been out improving their resume or doing further intensive research, who's just coming back and like to give us your first name, please? Anyone who's here for their very first ever AA meeting? Okay, do we have any visitors with us tonight?
Out of town?
Well, out of town would be fine.
That's me, Gary Revolution, Grateful Alcoholic.
Yeah, I thought maybe...
I drove here from West Boca. It's out of town.
Yeah, West Boca, that's a long way. I was going to ask if there anybody here from outer space. Okay. All right. Now then, it is... Oh yeah, I got to do this one. This is the definition of Alcoholics Anonymous, or some call it the preamble. There are other names. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, and may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting to our own contributions. And AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. The primary purpose of an Alcoholics Anonymous group and meeting is the teaching and practice of the 12 steps. And that's what we do in this meeting. Okay, guys, we're continuing our look at the 9th step tonight. 9th step commences on page 76, and your big book continues over to page 83. Now, last week we took a hard look at the 9th step in terms of what it is and what it is not, and what it is designed to accomplish, why it is it's necessary for us to work in 9th step. Originally, when our first members were getting sober, they were using the 6 steps of the Oxford group. And the Oxfordians had a vague idea that it was necessary to try to make some amends. But they had not at all developed the technique for doing so and the various elements of amends. And this, over the next 3 years, as our guys matured in their initial 3 years of sobriety, and before the big book was written, they had developed a pretty good idea what these amends should look like and what were the things that we needed to do in order to make proper amends. Making amends, by the way, is not a punishment. It's not something that we have to do because we've been bad people. Making amends has a very specific and very powerful spiritual significance, which is that when we feel guilt and remorse and shame, that this as surely blocks us off from God as do our defects of character. And so it's necessary for us to be set free from this guilt in order for us to enter the world of the Spirit. And that's exactly what's going to happen, because as we make our amends, we will enter the world of the Spirit and we'll become God conscious. We'll also be restored to sanity. So you can turn that around, and it becomes pretty obvious that those who balk at making amends don't get sober. They may stay sober for a while, but you see, we always have to go back to basics, don't we? If we are alcoholics, real alcoholics, and most of us here are, that means that we're powerless over alcohol. It means that we must stop drinking because we cannot abide alcohol. Our system will not handle it. And we cannot take any more alcohol into our system at all the rest of our lives. And yet, because we're powerless over alcohol, we're going to do that without help. Without help, it is too much for us. Linda just read. And that's what that means. This means we have to get a higher power between us and the booze. And one of the things which is so critical there is that we be freed from those things which block us off from God. We need to be free to accept His grace. And these guilts that we've been carrying and that we carried in here with us are terrible from that standpoint, because we get blocked from God big time by our guilt. So the purpose of making amends is not to punish us, it's to release us from the guilt and remorse and shame, which is a product of the harm that we've done others. Remembering too that we're not looking for forgiveness, although that's a wonderful thing if it happens. Our purpose here is to set matters straight. We clean off our side of the street. We don't worry about the other person's damage or wrongs at all. And it may be difficult to do that, because we may have spent 20 years seething in anger and resentment because of the wrongs that were done us years ago. And we've been told that we're quite justified in having those feelings. And yet, when we get to ninth step says you got to set that aside. We're only going to talk about ourselves. We're going to deal with the things that we did to try to set matters straight. We do not attempt in any way to justify our actions, nor do we attempt to blame the other person, no matter how much we may wish to do so. A lot of people balk at making amends to those whom they hate so strongly, but nevertheless, it has to be done if we wish to live. And so, the Big Book has broken this down into 5 basic parcels of, or bundles, if you will, of amends. And the first has to do with those people that we used to hate. Now keep in mind that when we say we used to hate them, this is said advisedly, and the Big Book makes it clear that we're talking about the people we hated, not the people we hate. Why? Well, go back to the 4th step and the 5th step and we find out why. You see, as we did our 4th step, and we identified the resentments and the hatreds and so forth that we were carrying around, we were also given a complete spiritual remedy to be freed from those. Presumably, we followed directions and we did that. Remember that Bill had said that, ask, how do I know if I did a proper 4th step? And he said, if you haven't lost all your resentments, you didn't do it right. Because the complete spiritual answer to our resentments is right there in the 4th step, and there's a little carryover into the 5th step. In any event, the Big Book is now assuming that the hatred is gone, in the sense of the active and strong hatred and resentments that we carried in with us. And so the first category of people that we are told we must make amends to are those we hated. And generally speaking, I would say this tends to be a pretty difficult amends to make, one that we probably don't want to make. It's quite common that if I hate you, you cordially hate me in return. And there's all kinds of bad feelings there that have built up perhaps for years. And I don't want to have to face you on that. I don't want to have to give you the opportunity to excoriate me and I'm helpless and can't do anything back to you. I just got to sit there and take it. Nevertheless, that's what we got to do. If you turn to page 77 and go down into the first full paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down. That's about 2/3 of the way down the page. It says this: nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. And this may be bitter medicine for some of us, but nevertheless, those are the directions, and that's what we must do. This is a great place for us to begin to utilize whatever faith we have developed by this time. We're going to turn to God and we're going to ask Him for help here. Ask Him to give us the strength to do this, and not to waver from it, and not to procrastinate, but go ahead and get it done. If you turn over to the next page, on page 78, in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own fault, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. And the Big Book might add there, because this is the nexus of this, all of this, that by having done this, we are released from the guilt that we carried into in here with us over the things we've done which harmed this person. Now the next part of the ninth step has to do with money, and I suppose that's pretty much of a universal problem. But not everybody coming in the door owes a lot of money. Some don't owe any at all. They manage their money quite well. It is kind of funny to think of, isn't it? Who in the hell who are those people? What's wrong with them? However, we have a prime example, don't we, in our big book, the story of Fred. Remember Fred, the accountant? Fred didn't have any debts. He didn't owe anybody anything. There was nothing wrong with his life except that he was a drunk. And he just doggone near killed himself with booze, but everything else was going fine. In any event, most people coming in the door owe money. And one of the things about this owing money is that it's a pretty palpable thing. It's something that we get the credit. The credit people are chasing us and they're hounding us and all this stuff, or we feel guilty because maybe we took money from our parents or somebody who was close to us, or stole money. A lot of us stole money, and we owe a lot of money. And what's happened in the past is if it got too terrible, we just left town, and we'd hide out someplace or go somewhere and figure they couldn't find us. We would rationalize that by saying, well, if I go out to L.A., that change of scenery will take care of everything and I'll get sober out there. And Balderdash, of course. L.A. that's the second worst to South Beach, It's a vain hope, of course, that L.A. is going to cure us. In any event, when we get to our ninth step, now we're faced with this, and it is an absolute. It is not something we can duck out from. Now, a lot of times when we come in here, we're wearing our wardrobe, and we may be practically unemployable. The last time we had any money in a bank account was 10.5 years ago. Although we seem to always find money for booze and drugs, but that doesn't count. And so we're faced now with the proposition that we're going to have to pay back what we owe. Now, you see, the way alcoholics are, at least most of us, you can check yourself on this, we're pretty impatient. We want it now. And we want this to go away now. If I can't pay everybody off, I ain't paying nobody. My mind says, well, that's perfectly okay. That's pretty sensible, actually. Why would you pay out nickels and dimes? Might take you 20 years. Well, I'm not going to be a slave to that for 20 years. Well, you are if you want to live. Whatever it takes, we're going to make restitution. And this is one of those things where one little bite at the apple is all it takes to get going. The people I sponsor sometimes are having difficulty writing their 4-step, especially their resentment list. And what I say to them is, look, you don't have to sit down and write the whole thing tonight. Your mind is telling you, you haven't got 4 hours, dummy. Put it off till tomorrow. You'll get to it tomorrow. And I say, look, all you have to do is commit yourself to writing for 15 minutes. And you can write more than that if you want, but you got to do 15 minutes every day. And I know you can find 15 minutes. Well, yeah, I guess I can. So we make an agreement. And it's amazing how fast those 15 minutes is, if that's a word, minutes is that a word, Kathy? I guess it is, add up. Pretty soon, the 4-step is done. Wow, how'd that happen? Everything else that we do in the terms of recovery is going to have to be utilizing the same idea. What do we think that one day at a time means? It certainly does not mean that we solve all of our problems in one day. It means that we take little bites out of our problems every day. And after a while, we look up and son of a gun, we've got the job done. So when we're setting out to make amends, one of the things that has to be done is we've got to quit hiding out. So that means we're going to have to acknowledge the fact that we have a debt. Then we're going to make some plans or some promises to make restitution, but only when we are sure that we can do it. Even if it's only $5 a month, even if it's only a pittance, it doesn't matter. We need to be sure that before we promise to do that we're going to keep that promise and that we're able to do so. A lot of times, of course, we're going to find, much to our amazement and our joy and happiness, that people have already written us off as bad debts long ago, and they don't want to have to mess with us anymore. And to set up our account again and then try to collect it would cost them a lot more than it would ever be worth. And so they'll say, well, that's nice of you to tell us that, but nevertheless, it's on your credit report, and that's enough revenge for us. We don't need your money. We wrote it off, took it off our taxes. In any event, many times these debts they may have even been outlawed by statute of limitations. We don't know because we haven't been keeping score. But all of a sudden we find out, in most cases, we're not being done for anywhere near as much money as we thought. And then quite often, if we're willing to make payments, we can work out a payment schedule. Quite often we get people to give us some additional time or to give us a break on how much we owe. So we work it out, make offers of compromise. You see what's happening here, guys? It's a pretty interesting thing because it's taking place in our heads as well as in our life outside of our head. What's taking place in our heads is that the guilt's going away. And as we're doing this, we're losing the guilt. And we're losing the fear. The fear that has been engendered by all the stuff that we owed. And them coming after us. And of course, if you go way back, it's an affront to our pride, our ego. We're deadbeats. Big time deadbeats, some of us. Now when we have to make amends for money that we owe to family, the usual thing is that family members will say, oh, that's okay. It's just wonderful to see you sober. That's all I need. Now, I think it's a mistake to say, whew, wow, that's a good deal. You can see why. It's too damned easy, isn't it? And really what we need to do is to say, look, here's what I want to do, Mom. I know that you give regularly to the Symphony Association or the Red Cross. I'm going to make a donation in an anonymous donation every year or every month. And I'm going to say to you, that's my way of thanking you and of making restitution to you for what I stole or what I borrowed. The moment that we do that, you see what's happened again is there's something going on the outside here, but there's something big time going on the inside. The guilt goes away. And as the guilt goes away, we open ourselves up more and more to God's Spirit. The third category is the criminal offense. And a lot of people come in the door having committed criminal offenses. A lot of them. And many times people coming in the door have committed offenses for which they have not been caught or prosecuted. And that's where it gets really sticky. Because some of those folks are spending most of their time looking over their shoulder. Now we're scared to death of getting a traffic ticket. Or wondering when it's going to be that the sheriff catches up with them. Or whether they have warrants outstanding. And this is a serious impediment to recovery, guys, a serious impediment. I mean, it's a matter really of living in a kind of a constant half-light world of fear. And so, in most cases, it's going to be necessary to own up to these things. Usually they're not of huge importance. Sometimes they are. A guy I sponsored had, let's see, he was wanted in 5 Florida counties. And he couldn't stay sober. He was so scared that he was going to get busted. Finally, we made an agreement. Take some time off. You're not going to need any money because where you're going, they're going to give you 3 hots and a cot. And a few of us will send you some commissary money once in a while. So you don't worry about your job. And go cop out to this stuff and get it over with. So that's what he did. He went to all 5 counties. He ended up spending about 9 months total in various county jails. And when he got all through with this, it was all through. Why, he had a smile on his face a mile wide when the next time I saw him. Now, I'm not going to say to you that you got to do that, but it's something which could very easily save your life. However, there are times when we cannot make amends because others are involved. And see, this is a really interesting aspect of the 9th step. Remember what it says? Except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, them doesn't mean the person making amends. It means the person we're making amends to. We can set matters straight. We must make amends, except when to do so would injure the person we're making amends to or third parties. And the rule there is pretty clear, isn't it? We're not permitted to do that. We're going to have to swallow that. We're going to have to live with it. Now, quite often, a serious offense, especially if it was committed years ago, where the person now has acquired the people in his life or her life that depend upon him, maybe gotten married, maybe there's a couple of kids involved, to go out and cop to a very serious offense, a prison sentence that would literally doom his family to penury, take away the kid's father at an important time in their lives, and put the wife in jeopardy, put the whole family structure in jeopardy. It's pretty obvious that runs a great risk of harming them. And so the Big Book tells us that there is a way that we approach this. And the way is this: we must go to the people who could be harmed, and we must ask them for permission to make these amends. If they give us permission, then we must be willing to go ahead and do it. Now then, you say, well, wait a second, Jim. You just got through telling us about half an hour ago, if we don't make these amends, we don't stop drinking and we're going to die. That's what I said. But the Big Book and God do not make too harsh terms of those who earnestly seek Him. There is an out clause here. It's not something that we can use willy-nilly, just saying that, oh, well, good, and then I don't have to do any of this stuff. It is, but it's definitely there because it's necessary that it be there. You see, it would be ridiculous for God to inspire a work which said, on the one hand, if you don't make these amends, you don't stay sober, you're blocked from me, and you'll die. And on the other hand, you can't make certain amends. You see what that's not even a catch-22. That's the gates of hell. And so that isn't the way it is. The way it is that we must be willing, down deep inside of ourselves, absolutely willing to make amends if we can. That's the proviso. It's the same kind of willingness that we talk about, and the willingness to believe that there is a God. The willingness to to take leaps of faith. The same willingness. The willingness to have God remove all of our defects of character. And so it comes down to this: if there are amends that I cannot make, because to do so would injure the person I'm making amends to or other people, then if I am willing to make those amends, if and when I can, then I will be relieved of the obsession of the guilt and remorse and shame. That's the out clause. But it must be carefully used, and it must be that, in the words of the first step, which talks about admitting deep down to our innermost selves. Well, this must be a commitment in our innermost selves to the willingness to make amends if we can. Now, the same rule is going to apply in other instances. For example, there are some people that we've lost track of, and we don't know where they are. There are people who have disappeared from our lives. We want to make amends to them, but we don't know how to do that. Or there are people who have died, and obviously we can't make personal amends to them. And so again, the rule is, if we are willing to make amends if we can, if, as, and when we can, we will be released from the guilt. Again, this has to be used with caution, because it's too easy for our alcoholic minds to give us this out and rationalize the hell out of it to a point where we begin to be self-deluded about it, and then we're in danger, because unless we are released from this guilt, we're in deep trouble. Now there's a story which illustrates this business of getting permission. It's on page 80. This is a real story about a real guy and his family. Now let's see what it has to say, because this is illustrative of this point. Top of page 80, before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action meant widespread approval. Today he's one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. Now that's an illustration of what is meant by this. It is in truth a spiritual principle, isn't it, that we may do nothing deliberately to harm another person, nor are we to let other people harm us. What, Howie?
That story in the last sentence that you read, this all happened years ago, and I interpret that as maybe before Alcoholics Anonymous came along.
No. Are 2 years You don't say 2 year, do you? You say 2 years.
I said years ago.
That's right.
Why?
2 years ago.
What's the implication?
Well, I can't help that. They couldn't write about something that happened more than 3 years ago because that's all they knew. So regardless of the implication, it's either 2 or 3 years ago. And this was written in 1939 or 1940.
Right.
So going back to 1935, you've got some years in there, and that's what years means. Is that okay?
No. It never says anything whether he made restitution or not. He stood up in the church and apologized, admitted what he did, but it doesn't say whether he made restitution.
Well, that's true. It doesn't go into details, Howie. But he exonerated his rival and probably restored his reputation. Whether he made restitution for the money, it doesn't say. I don't know what the answer is. Okay, now the next part of the next section of amends has to do with domestic troubles, particularly those troubles caused by those who have been unfaithful to their spouses. Of course, at the time this was written, nobody had ever heard of this politically correct term, significant other. If it was a significant other, it meant you were living in sin, and there wasn't any question about that. But there was still plenty of cheating going on, and so now we have to make amends for that. Well, you can see that that's a situation which is fraught with all kinds of danger for not only the person who was cheated upon, but the person who was cheated with. Now, so there are people who could be seriously injured if we were to find a point of all this and try to set ourselves free by spilling the beans on other people. So it really tells us here in this part of the ninth step that we've got to go a little slow here, and we have to be careful not to arouse those same horrible feelings as we aroused before. Remember, the big book says that the jealousy is the most terrible human emotion, and that's probably right. And so there's a tremendous amount of feeling involved, and I think the same rule is going to apply to us in other aspects. For example, suppose you're making amends to your family, and you've got a long history with them of abuse and things that you've done that were wrong and all kinds of stuff, and they've had to live through all of this, and now you want to sit down with them and you want to make amends. It would be a mistake in almost every case to make them relive the horrors of the past. You know, a parade of the horribles, trotting out all the stuff that you did, that you found out in your fourth step and you admitted in your fifth step, and make them go through that and relive it. Not a good idea, and contrary to what it is that this big book is telling us. We're not to do something like that if it's going to hurt the other person. Usually, we're going to have to be very cool about it. Not cruel, but cool. And we may have to be very cursory in our description of those things for which we're making amends. Now, once in a while, the other person is going to bring up all the stuff. I think I told you about my one and only ex-wife who had it all written down. There are people who will definitely do that. In fact, I've sponsored people who really could dig out all the old paperwork, and they could go back and point out all of these instances of bad behavior with other people, especially if it was somebody they were divorced from. Boy, they probably put it all together for the divorce lawyer. I don't know. It's amazing what we do. You know, it's amazing how much time do we spend every day just flushing our day down the toilet with this kind of nonsense. In any event, the big book says that we are not to identify the other woman or the other man, unless, of course, our spouse knows about them, because that would hurt them. Can you imagine the next 10 minutes later, the phone called the other woman. "Oh, hey, Susie, I know you've been going to bed with my husband. You better meet me for lunch tomorrow." They're going to sit down and have lunch, and if you're lucky, they'll just compare notes, you know. In any event, we don't do that. Now then, here's what it says. Page 81. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we're sure a wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we've been wild, gee, that's pretty nice. The politically correct people haven't settled on that one yet. Wildly challenged, or challenged with wild. Would that work? No. That we've been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She'll want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we've done. God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we've often found this is the best course to take. Can you imagine the reaction of the wife? Holy cow. Our desire. I want to know who she is. If she's smart, she won't. You're either going to get on with life, aren't you guys, or you're not. You know what? Here's the beautiful thing, and it's true for all of us. We have the opportunity to start right here tonight, look at our past as ancient history we can learn from, and go on from here. We get to start a whole new life. What a miracle. So many people just haven't figured that one out yet. Still living in the past, still daydreaming about the future, not giving a damn about today, and they're going nowhere. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It's as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. It's better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent her jealousy. Well, that's spoken like a true man. I mean, because if you turned the tables, there'd be husbands who would be ready to go kill. All right. Go to the middle page of page 82 now. If we have no such complication, there's plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience of mothers and wives who have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today and would perhaps be dead. And of course that Bill is describing himself there because it was Lois who somehow kept everything glued together. The alcoholic's like a tornado roaring its way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He's like the farmer who came up out of a cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife he remarked, "Don't see anything wrong here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Let's go.
It's my favorite line in the whole book.
Yeah, ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing? Get in the truck, Ma, and don't sit on the dog. Page 83, one of the great lines in the big book. We don't want to miss this now. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. And that applies directly to our 12th step, doesn't it? Practice these principles in all of our affairs. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. That's what we're setting out to do now. Our behavior will convince our families more than words, and that goes right back to our third step, doesn't it? Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. My actions, God, to be helpful to others because they demonstrate your power working in and through me. So it is our actions. You're a sponsor. Keep in mind that your actions are far more powerful in leading your sponsees than anything you can say. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves we would right them if we could. That's the willingness. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. Letter's a very, very good way to make amends, and it's where somebody's died or they're moved away and we can't get to them. We don't know where they are. Write the letter same as you'd write if you had them in front of you. May be valid reasons for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. Scraping, that doesn't mean scraping the mud off your shoes, you know. That's kowtowing. Scraping is scraping the forehead along the floor, you know, that kind of servility. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. That's not an excuse, however, for abusive, aggressive behavior. It means that we don't crawl. It doesn't mean that we have a right to make others crawl. There's a big difference. All right, we're going to be looking at the 10th step next week. I plan to be here, God willing, and the creek don't rise. Where's the hat? Who's got the hat?
How many hats do we wear, sir?
Many as we can pass out, man. Here we go. Oh, you got one there.
Secretary's report?
Huh? Secretary's report. Kathy, please.
Okay. Not talking to Kathy. We have 58 meetings.
Quiet down now. Listen, please.
You need 2 years of sobriety to chair a Big Book Step or tradition meeting, 1 year to chair an 8:30 for beginners, and 6 months to chair a regular meeting. There's some openings for the month of October there if you'd like to get into service. Anniversary night is the last Sunday of the month at 7, and our business meeting is the first Sunday of the month at 6:45. Every Saturday we clean here at 1 o'clock. If you would like to get involved in service, come and help us clean up after the 12 o'clock meeting. We have AA bulletin boards, AA related, and a classified bulletin board in the back for you to use. Please park in the parking lot right across. It has 5 spots in it. The spots are along the edge of the building here. Do not park in our neighbor's lot with a fence. And at night, you can take a chance and park open. We have another lot across the street which you can park in. Choose your lot. Get your lot, whatever. Let me see. We have a temporary sponsor list. Please don't throw your cigarette butts outside. Clean up after yourselves. And your mom doesn't work here. So if you have a cup, you're on the cleanup committee. I think that's it. What do you think, Jim?
Okay, thanks, Kathy. And Michelle's going to do the chips for us now. Yeah, she didn't know it, but that's what she's doing.
Thanks, Jim. I'm
You're
Michelle, I'm
welcome.
an alcoholic.
Yeah.
We have a chip system. A white chip is for 1 day. Anybody want a white chip?
See, I wanted to do Scott a big favor. That's why I had to do that.
Oh, okay. We have a red chip for 30 days. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's different here. See? 30 days, silver. No? Okay. And 90 days? No? And is it 6 months? Okay. 6 months? No? Yes?
Yeah, that's just written right.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Yeah.
You did a good job.
Yeah.
But did you do 9 months?
Oh, there's Okay, 9 months.
How about birthdays?
Birthday, I don't even know what it
At the
is.
anniversary, celebrate the first year, put your name on the wall. Yeah. Celebrate with the cake.
Give yourself and your higher power.
I want to talk to you about that applauding your higher power stuff.
Jim, excuse me,
What, Howie?
you plan on being in the stairway group on Saturday?
What?
You plan on being in the stairway Saturday?
Oh, Saturday at 101. God willing, the creek don't rise. I'll be at all 3 meetings.
What time are they, sir?
1:30, 7:30, and 9:15. You're quite welcome, Howie. Thanks for the reminder. I would have forgotten all about those. Okay, let's close the meeting.
Somebody forgot about the announcement. That's okay.
My fault.
Not your fault. It was Kathy, but that's okay. Not a big deal.
Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. A moment of silence for those who are still suffering. And we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. Thank you. Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen.
What about the alcoholic cheating on his wife? So the wife ends up going to the pharmacist. You hear about this? She asks the pharmacist, she needs arsenic. The pharmacist says, what do you need arsenic for? She says, I can't give you arsenic because and the pharmacist's wife. He says, oh, I'll get it. That's great.
That makes sense.
I can give you autographs.
You know,
No, you didn't tell us. Tell us about that. I didn't hear that story yet.
We want a good bedtime story tonight.
Gotcha, Jim.
Notice the girls are always with it. Give us a good story, we want to hear.
We want to know if she was from Billings.
okay, now, so this lady had a 3x5 notebook which she carried into the marriage with her, along with her insanity and a lot of other baggage I didn't know about. And this 3x5 notebook was written in little tiny like this for 12 years. And every sin I ever had in her life, in her opinion, was written down in there. And eventually it got to a point where, in order for it to go through the catechism of my sins, it would take about 20 minutes. And I just sit there and listen, you know. I can remember vividly one day I was I had been given direct orders to mow the lawn. But I was making a terrible mistake of sitting on the couch reading the sports page. And that started the whole catechism of my sins. Somebody asked me one time at another meeting, well, what were you thinking about all this time she was doing that? And I said, I was trying to figure out some way to kill her. And get away with it, of course.
Smart lawyer.
So I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Thanks for calling on me, Jim. What's up? Awesome bottom line. Gary Revolution, Great Block Holder. I always dedicate my contribution to my commissary girls through a miracle. Anyway, listen, man, I just got something good to share on this. This step is something ingrained in me. I had 3 people I didn't work. I was insane. And my mother, my father, and my son. Now, my alcoholism took me to heavy narcotics use, and my mother and father, the last 2 years of my active addiction and alcoholism, they knew that every day I left the house, I had that's hell. And I cleaned it up. I was like instant amens for both of them. It was like, but a couple of years later, when I was mentally intact, somewhat, that's cute. Anyway, I verbally said to them, listen, that wasn't me, that was this insane disease. And my son, awesome God story concerning my son and amens. It was one amens I swore I'd never make to my son. He once said to me, Daddy, don't take me to these dirty places anymore. So, and I said, I'll never make that amends. About 5 years ago, he says to me, hey, Daddy, remember you used to take me to those dirty places? So it was like a sense of excitement. So God just wiped that out. Another deep amends is my cousin caught me using the drugs in his bathroom. And he was so shocked. He didn't even like respond. But I made amends to him verbally. When you all think of a sober apology is a lot different than a drunk, insane apology.
You're right. You're right, yeah. And I think that's what this story is telling us. It was a sober apology and setting the record straight. Certainly that's a major amends, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know what else, Jim? God jumps out at you from every page of that book. Every page.
Sure.
It was proven at the Lions Club. A guy was chairing a big book meeting. So every picked 8 spots. Every spot I was blasted with God.
Of course.
Truth.
Well, sure.
What a blessing we have here. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Sharing that.